For those of you who think the sky is falling for the Sacramento Kings, what's happening behind me is probably not the best omen. The Jumbotron of the Golden One Center lowered all the way down to the floor. Maybe a metaphor for the Sacramento Kings falling down the standings, now in supreme danger of dropping out of the play-in altogether. We'll break down their current place in the standings after Sacramento's loss to the Boston Celtics right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all season long. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. And when I say the Kings are hanging on by a thread, I mean it. With their loss to the Boston Celtics tonight, 113-95, a loss that we all expected, by the way. It's not like we're looking at this game and going, oh God, how could the Sacramento Kings lose to the Boston Celtics? Of course they did. We know that the Kings beat the Celtics in Boston earlier this season. That was a tremendous win for this team. The likelihood that the Kings were going to sweep the Celtics in their two-game regular season series was significantly low. So this is not a doom and gloom podcast because the Kings lost to the Celtics. It's going to be a doom and gloom podcast because of the timing and the position that the Sacramento Kings put themselves in that I and so many others have seen coming. But what I didn't see coming was how quickly the Sacramento Kings have fallen, or nearly fallen, out of the play-in. They've lost 8 of their last 11 games. Now, in that stretch were 2 really, really good wins against the Memphis Grizzlies and the Cleveland Cavaliers to open up this homestand, to make ourselves feel pretty good and to kind of hide how much of a slide this Kings team has been on. What's funny is, if I'm not mistaken, and it's not funny at all, I'm being sarcastic, at the start of this 11-game stretch that the Kings have gone 8-3, Sacramento was in 7th place, or hovering around 7th place, and around half a game out of 6th. They were in the hunt for avoiding the play-in altogether and making it to the playoffs. Now, I don't believe at the time I expected Sacramento to actually get there, but they were in the conversation. Now here they are 11 games later, and the coin is completely flipped. They are potentially going to avoid the play-in by not being in it. They are only half a game out of both the 10th and 11th seeds. 11th being the death number, right? For those poker players out there that have been in a poker tournament before, you know that bubble spot, right? The spot right before everybody gets paid. If you're the bubble, it's the most painful position to be in. The Sacramento Kings are in danger, half a game above bubbling out of the play-in tournament. The Dallas Mavericks beat the Brooklyn Nets tonight. The Phoenix Suns beat the Milwaukee Bucks by 2 points on essentially a Devin Booker game winner. The Suns are a legitimate team. And like I said, the Kings now half a game above both of those spots. Now, the good news is that between these 3 teams, at least from the Kings, Sacramento has the tiebreaker over the Dallas Mavericks. And I believe they are up 2-1 this season on the Phoenix Suns. So as of right now, they have the tiebreaker against the Suns. However, the Phoenix Suns play the Sacramento Kings in this building on the very last day of the season. So that game could decide who gets home court advantage in the opening round of the play-in. That game could decide whether or not the Sacramento Kings make the play-in outright, or if things go catastrophically wrong over the remainder of this season, that game might not matter at all for either team. There is an argument that can be made that out of the three teams fighting for these final two play-in spots, the Sacramento Kings are the worst of the three. To me, the best is the Phoenix Suns. Now, I know their season has been a roller coaster, a major disappointment, right? And there's a lot of turmoil, clearly a lot of issues around that team and what's happening in Phoenix. Like, it's not great. It's not ideal. They aren't nearly at the position that they expected to be in. However, regardless of what's going on, they still have a guy named Kevin Durant, a guy named Devin Booker, and even Bradley Beal, who's not a bad third option there in Phoenix. That's still a really talented basketball team that when it comes down to it over the final handful of games this season, they can get the job done like they did tonight against Milwaukee. And if the Sacramento Kings meet them in a winner-take-all play-in game for their postseason lives, those are three dynamic stars that the Sacramento Kings have to be concerned with. So I would absolutely put the Suns as the best team out of the three. Now, the Dallas Mavericks, I think most would say, are worse than the Sacramento Kings, mainly because of how banged up they are. However, they're starting to get healthy. Anthony Davis is back. And the Dallas Mavericks aren't just playing for their playoff lives right now. They're playing for their freaking dignity. Because whether the players care about this or not, although I believe they do, the organization knows that they cannot be fine with tanking or falling out of the playoffs or even the play-in picture the same season that they traded Luka Doncic for Anthony Davis because defense wins championships. Right? So they're playing for their dignity and their pride, not just to make it to the playoffs. There's a very, very, very real scenario where the Sacramento Kings are the third team on the outside, looking at the Mavericks and looking at the Suns and watching that first play-in game from their couch. 2 weeks ago, I didn't think this would be the case. I thought, yeah, the Kings were maybe in danger of falling to 10th, but falling out, no, I did not expect that to happen. Now it's very real. And oh yeah, the Kings take on the Oklahoma City Thunder tomorrow. The best team in the NBA, some would say. Y'all, there's a very good chance that I'll be doing a podcast in this exact same spot tomorrow night after a Kings loss to the Oklahoma City Thunder, where the Sacramento Kings will be in 11th on the outside looking in. We'll talk more about that OKC game at the end of this podcast. But I've talked about this before on Locked On Kings. And when I put out on social media tonight the status of the Kings and their play-in race, I saw a lot of comments, people saying, good. Fall out of the play-in altogether. Keep the draft pick. That's what a lot of people are saying, and it's completely understandable. If the Kings miss the play-in, they will more than likely keep their pick. It is top 12 protected. If it falls out of the top 12, so 13 or higher, it goes to the Atlanta Hawks as part of the Kevin Huerter trade from years ago. And yes, of course, Kevin Huerter is on the Chicago Bulls, who, by the way, have won 8 of their last 10 games, are absolutely balling right now after the departure of Zack LaVine. If the Kings make it to the top 12 in draft lottery odds, or get the top 12 pick after the draft lottery, they will keep that draft pick. That's the good news. The bad news is, by keeping their draft pick in this year's draft, which is a really good way to, I wouldn't say fully start a rebuild, because it's not like the Kings will have a high lottery pick, unless they get super lucky in the draft lottery, which of course is possible. Very unlikely, but possible. The pick then becomes a 2026 protected first-round pick that would go to Atlanta, and the protections drop down to top 10 protected. Now, there's a scenario where if the Kings do blow it up and go full rebuild, that they will be one of the 10 worst teams in the NBA, or at least have one of the top 10 best lottery odds. If that pick doesn't convey, then it becomes 2 future second-round picks for Atlanta, and this whole saga is over. But the other side of that coin is that if the Sacramento Kings make the play-in and lose their draft pick, let's say it's 13th, the worst spot it could possibly be, but it's 13th, and it goes to Atlanta. What that does is that frees up all of their future-owned first-round picks that the team controls, all of the Kings' future first, because they have a Spurs future first, they have a Timberwolves future first, all of those are freed up, which opens the door for more of a quick fix, right? If the Kings wanted to try and this summer make another big swing move and attach a lot of first-rounders to a trade package to try and bring in one more piece at one last-ditch effort to make the Beam team as we know it work, that's the route that they could go. So my question to you is, in your opinion, what's better? To have a top 12 or a lottery draft pick this upcoming summer, but keep your future draft picks a little bit, not completely, but a little bit locked up because of that Kevin Huerter trade? Or getting it out of the way, getting that pick gone to Atlanta and freeing up the rest for a potential big move? Where I'm leaning is I do feel like it's in the best interest of the Sacramento Kings to keep their top 12 protected draft pick this year, because I'm of the belief that the Kings are they've put themselves into a position where the best case scenario is going to be some form of rebuild. Maybe not a full-on blow-up rebuild, but let's put it this way. I've said this before and I'll say it again. I do not have faith and trust in this front office at this point. I do not have faith and trust in this front office to use their freed up future firsts to make another desperate move to try and save their jobs and save whatever this freaking version of the Sacramento Kings are. I don't trust it. I don't believe in it. I don't think that's the route that the Sacramento Kings should go. That's just my opinion, but I want to hear yours. Would you like to see the Kings keep their draft pick for this coming summer, or get rid of it and allow them to free up all their picks for a potential big move this summer, or at least their picks are freed up going forward and this Kevin Huerter trade with the Hawks is finally behind us? Let me know. Hit me up on Twitter at MattGeorgeSack. Email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com. Leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. Going to take a quick break here. When we come back, though, you're going to hear from Zack LaVine and Domantas Sabonis talking about this play-in race. Plus, we're going to talk about when we see the Kings take on a legit contender like the Boston Celtics, it's a painful reminder of how far this team still has to go to get to any sort of contendership, and how the age of their core, the average age of their core, makes it even worse. That's all still coming here on Locked On Kings. Before that, though, like I said at the top of the show, today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track of your money. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start actually building your wealth. You'll get some amazing insights like your spending habits, where your money is going specifically, how much money you spend in certain areas, whether it's on food, a restaurant that you frequent, a subscription service that you have. Plus, there's all-in-one convenience, right? You don't have to worry about a bunch of different websites or apps or spreadsheets to track all of your different types of spending and all of your money. It's all together in one easy place with your long-term goals there as well. Plus, collaboration is easy. If you have separate bank accounts with your partner, managing money is easy and smooth, so it reduces that stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. After the game, we spoke with Zack LaVine and Domantas Sabonis, who both spoke on the status of the Sacramento Kings, where they're at in the standings in this play-in race. Zack LaVine talks about how the vibe isn't very good in the Kings locker room right now because of their circumstances. And Domantas Sabonis reminds us all how very aware the Kings are of their current position.
The vibe is not good. It shouldn't be. We're not happy with the way we've been performing individually and as a group. And the games aren't going to stop us at the point of the season now where it's nut crunching time. So figure out how to get a win. We're playing good in spurts, obviously, but that doesn't win you a game. So we understand the standings, but we just got to take it one game at a time and figure out how to get one. We can't look too far ahead in that, because if you do that, we're going to just keep snowballing like the way we are.
We're aware. It's a very tough position, and every game matters, and we just got to play our best basketball and win the most games we can to stay out of that.
So what I'm about to say or talk about sounds on the surface level kind of obvious, because I'm going to talk about how watching the Kings take on a defending champion like the Boston Celtics, who's a massive threat to repeat as NBA champions this year, right? A legit contender, one of the best, arguably the best team in the NBA. When you look at the Kings play them, you realize, oh my God, there's still a massive gap, right? Something that's always stuck with me is former Kings head coach Mike Brown's comments on, it's easy to get from bad to good. It's really hard to get from good to great. Celtics are in that great category. The Sacramento Kings were in the good, but they're trending in the wrong direction, right? You can see how wide that gap is between a team like the Kings and a legit contender like the Boston Celtics. Well, no duh, Matt. We can tell by the standings that the Sacramento Kings are not nearly as good of a team as the Boston Celtics. Nobody looks at this Kings team and says, oh man, they should be a contender or they're in contention. No, but you're still trying to get there. If not, what the hell are you doing? Right, as much for all of us, as much as the idea of the Kings being a perennial playoff team for the next 5 years sounds great, if there's not contention for a title somewhere in that mix, you're just shooting for being fun, I guess, which, again, there's a part of me that fully understands the idea and the appeal of, yeah, Matt, I would absolutely take 5 straight years to the Kings just being a playoff team. I don't care about how far they make it. I don't care if they win a title during it or at the end of it. Just get to the playoffs 5 straight years. I'll take that after the hell that we've been through for nearly the last 20. I understand that completely, but that's not how this front office is operating, and that's not how they should operate, right? They are operating, this team, this organization is operating with the belief or the desire to eventually contend for a championship. And we can clearly see how far this team has to go. Now, there were elements of this game where the Kings did really well. They hung with the Celtics throughout this entire first half, right? Sacramento led for pretty much the entire first quarter until Peyton Pritchard hit a buzzer beater to put the Celtics up 30-29, I believe, at the end of the first quarter. And on one hand, it's like, yes, it is a good thing that the Kings hung with the Boston Celtics. But we can clearly see, as the game goes on, where the gaps are with the Kings. How far they have to go. And hanging with a team is fun and good and positive to say for a young, up-and-coming, developing team like the Sacramento Kings were 3-4 years ago, right? When you have a young star in De'Aaron Fox at the time, or a future young star, someone you believe is a young star going forward. You even had Marvin Bagley at that time. We know how it played out, but he was a second overall pick. The Kings hanging with a championship contender and playing them hard feels good in a scenario like that, where you're not there currently, but you're developing and you're moving towards what you believe to be a bright future. There is no bright future for this Kings team as constructed. The average age of their Sabonis, DeRozan, LaVine core is 31 years old. So what about this team is going to develop over the years into a championship contender? And now you might be listening to this and pushing back and going, Matt, the Kings just beat the Cavaliers. They're the first place team in the East. That was a fantastic win. You're 100% right. It was. However, to me, that win followed by the 3 straight losses that the Kings are on, which started with their loss at home to the Chicago Bulls, speaks to the inconsistencies of this roster, this team, and this organization that should not be there for the veteran talent that they have at the core of this roster. And also, they beat the Cleveland Cavaliers on the backs of their young players playing really, really well. Devin Carter had a breakout game. Keon Ellis has been playing really well. Keegan Murray, right? The young defenders are what sparked that win for the Sacramento Kings. Where this team is at is not encouraging for the future, and it sure as hell right now is not encouraging for the present. Zack LaVine's last 3 games. Let's just run through this really quick. Zack LaVine's last 3 games, and I'm not saying this to bag on the guy. Tonight, 14 points, shot 37% from the field, 20% from three-point range, 4 turnovers. The other night versus the Bucks, Saturday night, 16 points, 41% from the field, again 20% from three-point range, and again 4 turnovers. And then against the Bulls, his former team, 8 points, 22% shooting from the field, 16% from three-point range, 2 turnovers. Now, to be fair, that was the game after he returned from missing the Cavaliers win because of some personal issues, some personal reasons. We don't know what those issues and reasons are. There's no reason to pry, right? But maybe there's some distractions. Maybe there's some things happening outside this building for Zack LaVine. We can be sympathetic to that, but still evaluate how he's performing. And he's not performing up to the level that the Sacramento Kings expected, hoped for when they traded for him. Now, I'm not ready to say I'm completely out on Zack LaVine and that this was a complete and utter catastrophic failure, because the reality is Zack LaVine's going to likely be a Sacramento King for the next 2 seasons with how much money he's being paid. The Kings were pretty much the only team, I guess, willing to take on that Zack LaVine contract from the Chicago Bulls. And they did, and here they're at. Here's where they're at. So, again, I'm not bagging on Zack LaVine, but this is the most important time of the season. This is the stretch, a very competitive stretch. And LaVine's not living up to what this Kings team needs from him. Doug Christie said after the game that he was commenting on the lack of threes that the Kings shot in comparison to the Boston Celtics, who we know put up a crap ton of threes. And he said both Keegan Murray and Zack LaVine need to be taking like 10 threes a game. Zack LaVine had 5 tonight. Zach was asked about that, and I played the clip for you, but there's an expletive. He says, S-word, I'd love to do that. But he goes on to say, and I'm paraphrasing here, he basically says, but I can't just chuck those shots up. Like, we need to find a way to create those looks for me, create those looks for Keegan, create those good open looks from the perimeter. But he then finished it up by saying, but yes, I do need to be shooting more than 5 threes a night. So Zack LaVine's clearly aware that he needs to be shooting the basketball more, and he needs to be shooting the basketball better. The problem is it too little too late for this Kings team? And how much really would it matter? I don't know how much it would have mattered tonight against the Boston Celtics. But if the Kings want not just any hope of making it through the play-in and into the playoffs, at this point, if they want to hold on to a play-in spot, they need to get Zack LaVine going. And then there's DeMar DeRozan, too, who had his struggles in this game. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the Kings once again having a horrendous offensive fourth quarter in this game. And we'll take a look at not just the Kings-Thunder game tomorrow, but their schedule afterwards that people say is easier. Yes, it's easier than a doubleheader against the Celtics and the Thunder, but it's still not any kind of cakewalk. We'll walk through it here in a second. Even with the departure of De'Aaron Fox and the end of that Beam team, offense still being the primary strength of this team is it's the same, right? Yes, they went in and got some better defenders like Jake LaRavia and Jonas Valanciunas, but ultimately the Sacramento Kings are still a team that is going to hang their hat. Their primary strengths are going to be on the offensive end, and this is the second straight game where the Kings offensively have not been good, right? They didn't even get to triple digits tonight. Finished with 95 points. In the fourth quarter, after scoring just 16, I believe, points in the fourth quarter. Maybe it was 19. 16 or 19. I apologize. I don't remember. I didn't write it down in front of me. They were under 20 points in the fourth quarter in their loss against the Milwaukee Bucks on Saturday night. Tonight, 17 total points. But they only had 13 points in the quarter at the 2-minute, 36-second mark when Doug Christie waved the white flag, pulled all his starters, and emptied his bench. This Kings team in the fourth quarter is not scoring. Now, it's easy to just point our finger primarily at DeMar DeRozan and a little bit at Zack LaVine because they are the Kings closers. They are the guys taking the majority of shots in the fourth quarter. LaVine took 7 of the Kings' 21 shots in the quarter. DeRozan just 3 of the 21 shots in the fourth quarter. DeRozan tonight had 20 points and 10 assists, so a double-double, and the 10 assists is fantastic for DeRozan. The problem is his 20 points came on 24 shots. Another very, very inefficient shooting night for DeMar DeRozan. Both of them, of course, wear blame for Sacramento's offensive struggles in the fourth quarter. Not just when they're missing shots, but because they command so many shots and they do slow things down, and the Kings lean on them for isolation ball, and it's just not the best offense. But the Kings as a whole, including the coaching staff, Doug Christie, they have to look at their fourth quarters, these last fourth quarters, and they can't just make DeRozan and LaVine their scapegoats. And, of course, nobody's going to throw those guys under the bus. But the Kings need to do a significantly better job of moving the basketball in the fourth quarter. It just hasn't worked. 2 games in a row where would a better offensive fourth quarter have made too big of a difference in this game? No, I felt like the Celtics had put this game away in the third quarter or built a big enough lead to where I felt pretty strongly that the Kings weren't going to make a game of it and weren't going to bring it back. That being said, these fourth quarters have not been encouraging at all for a team who's, again, their primary offensive strength or primary strength period is on the offensive end of the floor, and they have 2 of the better closers in the game, one of the best in DeMar DeRozan specifically. The Kings, as a team, need to do a better job of moving the basketball and ultimately being less predictable. Because sure, DeMar DeRozan is hard to stop when he gets into his bag and he gets on that spot, that isolation clear-out spot that he loves in the mid-range from the wing. However, opposing teams know that too. They can watch while 4 Kings offensive players are completely taken out of the play and they don't have to worry about them at all while they stick their best defender or whoever they feel is best to handle DeRozan in those isolation moments. And I'm not saying that it's a safe bet, but it's a little too one-dimensional. And when it doesn't work, the Kings have no alternative. Clearly, they have no alternative because it hasn't worked these last couple of games. So the Kings take on the Thunder tomorrow, second night of a back-to-back. Domantas Sabonis, no idea if he's going to play in that game or not. I have a feeling that he will. He came back early from his moderate ankle sprain, extremely early. Not just early by moderate ankle sprain standards, but early by like the Sacramento Kings timeline standards. When the Kings initially announced or gave us an update on Sabonis' injury, they said that he was going to be reevaluated essentially at the end of this homestand. Now he comes back midway through it. Didn't have any kind of minutes restriction tonight. Was watching him. It didn't look like he was laboring at all, so that's good. Sabonis is as tough as they freaking come, and I love him for it. Doug Christie called him like an ultimate teammate before the game because of how tough he is and how he puts his body on the line and fights through the pain to be out there for his teammates. I appreciate that. I think it's fair to assume that Domantas Sabonis is going to play tomorrow night versus the Oklahoma City Thunder. I also don't think it's going to matter that much. I think the Thunder are going to come into Sacramento and they're going to roll the Kings tomorrow. The Kings haven't been good on second night of back-to-backs, period. And now they got the best team coming in. So I'm not feeling pretty confident. I'm not feeling pretty good about the Kings in this game. But after that, you might say, Matt, well, even if they end that game and they're in 11th, because the Dallas Mavericks do play the New York Knicks tomorrow night. They're in New York. There's a very good chance the Mavs will lose that game. The Suns are off. The Suns play the Celtics on Wednesday, but there's a very good chance that the Celtics will be without Jason Tatum in that game after he hurt his ankle tonight when he landed on Sabonis' foot. Sabonis was issued a flagrant foul for it, apologized for it after the game, said he feels awful about it. For some reason, people think Domantas Sabonis is a dirty basketball player. He's not. It was a foul. It was a flagrant foul by the rule, but there was nothing intentional behind it. He was trying to close out on Tatum, who was having a fantastic game before hurting his ankle, but I digress. After this Thunder game, whether the Kings are in 9th, 10th, or 11th, many of you are trying to take solace or trying to be optimistic about the schedule lightening up after that, and it does. And I'm not trying to rain on your parade here, but let's talk about reality a little bit. Because yes, it gets easier than a back-to-back against the 2 best teams in the NBA. But after that, they take on the Blazers to end this homestand. They've already lost to the Blazers twice. They 100% should win that game at home, but they should have won against the Chicago Bulls, and we know how that played out. Then they begin a 6-game road trip in Orlando against a Magic team that just beat the Lakers tonight. Then they take on the Indiana Pacers, who are a very dangerous team with Tyrese Halliburton. Need I say more? After that, sure, you have 2 games against the Wizards and the Hornets. Dear God, if the Kings lose both of those games, just forget it. If they lose one of those games, it's disappointing. They should pick up both those games. They need to pick up both of those games in this play-in race. But after that, they take on the Cavs in Cleveland. The Cavs want revenge. There are some that are saying, yeah, Matt, but the Cavs might be shutting it down at that point and getting ready for the playoffs. You could be right, except the Cavs right now are on a losing streak. They're reeling a little bit, or they were on a losing streak. I think they just picked up a win. They're trying to get back into form before what's expected to be a tough and potentially deep playoff run for Cleveland. After that, you take on a Detroit Pistons team that you've already lost to in this building. In fact, they were the last team that Mike Brown played before Mike Brown got fired. We know how that game ended with the Jaden Ivey 4-point play and the foul by De'Aaron Fox. Then you come home for your final 3 games of the season against Denver, the Clippers, and the Suns. We already talked about what that Suns game could mean at the very end. Denver and Clippers, 2 good teams, 2 better teams than you in the West. Who knows if they're going to be playing their guys or not based off the play-off situation, but outside of the play-in race, the playoff race is still very tight in a lot of ways in the West. So there's a very good chance that all 3 of those teams will have a lot to play for in that final homestand to end the season for the Sacramento Kings. So yes, the schedule does lighten up, but there are still a lot of losses in there. Or I can still make an argument for a lot of losses in that stretch through the final portion of the season. It's not like the Kings are just playing a bunch of easy teams from here on out after the Oklahoma City Thunder game tomorrow. So it's just the reality of where the Sacramento Kings are at. Will they hold on to a play-in spot? I don't know. I don't know at this point. They're in serious danger of losing it. Like I said, they're hanging on by a thread. So you tell me, I already asked you how you feel about or what you would like to see the Kings do or get or end up with their draft pick this year. But gut feeling right now, after tonight, or maybe you can sleep on it and wake up and answer this question the next morning. Gut feeling. Are the Sacramento Kings going to make the play-in or are they not? Let me know. At Matt George Sack on Twitter. Email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com. Leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. I will see you back here tomorrow after Kings and Thunder. Hopefully it's not ugly. Maybe the Kings can pull off a major surprise and win that game and get back on track. We'll have to wait and see. But no matter what, I'll have a podcast for you. I'll see you then. Until then, my name is Matt George. You've been listening to the Locked On Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.